Hello and welcome to my video where I'm going to show you how to make a miniature book with a leather cover. This miniature bookbinding tutorial involves long stitch binding, and although fiddly at such a small size, it is fairly straightforward. I love all things mini and I hope you enjoy this project. In order to follow along, you're going to need a metal ruler, a pen or pencil, some scrap cardboard, some paper, a piece of stiff card, some bulldog clips, a heavy book or a flower press, a beading needle and thread, a push pin, some PVA glue and a cocktail stick, a small pot, a pair of scissors, some safety pins, a craft or utility knife and a cutting mat, a small piece of leather, some strong clear glue, a piece of cord if you'd like to add a strap, and if you have one, a bone folder. For the paper, I'm just using some regular white printer paper, and for the glue, I'm using UHU all-purpose adhesive. Right, so the first thing you need to do is cut out a template. You need to cut this out from stiff card, and it should measure 1.25 inches high and 2 inches wide. You then need to use this template to cut out the book pages. In order to make exactly the same book as me, you're going to need 20 pieces of paper the same size as this template. There are basically two options for your book pages. They can either have straight smooth edges or ripped edges. I chose to have ripped edges. If you want smooth edges, the easiest way is to use a guillotine or a paper cutter if you have one. Otherwise, you can use an X-Acto knife and a ruler or some scissors. To get rough or ripped edges, I first slightly marked 1/2 inch from each edge of the paper with my pencil. Then I folded along each edge. Make sure you make all of your folds nice and crisp using your fingernail or a bone folder. I then ripped along these fold lines. In order to help you rip the paper in a straight line, you can use water or a ruler. There's also something called a tear bar, which is specifically designed for this purpose. I personally prefer to use the water method for the longer edges, and to do this I wet my finger with water and run it along the fold quickly to make the fold slightly damp. You don't want to soak the paper at all, just dampen it. Then you should be able to easily tear along that fold. Otherwise, you can hold a metal ruler along the crease and rip the paper against it. Once the outside edges are torn, you can then tear the sheet into 3 strips. These strips need to be the width of the template, so use that to mark light pencil lines on the paper before tearing. Then rip along these lines with your chosen method. Then rip these strips into individual pieces the same size as the template. For these tears, I use the ruler method instead. The water method is a little bit more time consuming perhaps and makes a fuzzier edge. The ruler method is more convenient, but I find it easier to rip the paper in the wrong place. It really just depends what you prefer to do. Then fold each of these pieces in half, so you get 2 pages facing you that are 1 inch wide. Each of these folded pieces is called a folio, and you're going to need 20 folios. So 1 folded piece of paper is 1 folio, which equals 2 leaves, which equals 4 pages. Place 5 folios inside each other to create a signature. Altogether, you're going to need 4 of these signatures. Then use a pencil to mark where the holes are going to be made on the edge of each signature. These marks need to be 3/16 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch from each end. Then take the outer folio, which is the one with the marks on, off each signature, reverse the fold, and then place it inside the same signature. This is so that you can see the pencil marks on the inside of each signature. You then need to make holes in each signature. To do this, you'll need a push pin and a folded piece of scrap cardboard. Simply push the pin through the signature from the inside at the points where you've marked with your pencil. Then pick up the signature and push the pin all the way through each of the holes, just to make sure that they're large enough for a sewing needle to go through. Repeat this for all 4 signatures. And now you need to prepare the cover of the book. So cut out a piece of leather that's larger by at least ½ inch than what you want the finished cover to be. Use a push pin to transfer the same markings from the signatures to the centre of this cover. Then make 3 more holes next to each of these holes you've just made so they're in a line. Make these holes as close together as you reasonably can, but not so close that you rip the leather. Then push the pin fully through each of these holes, and also mark where the holes are on the inside of the cover using a pen, otherwise you might struggle to find them later on. And then it's time to do the binding. For the thread, I'm using Nymo beading thread, which is a fine nylon thread that's slightly waxed. You need something fine enough to go into the eye of a beading needle, and ideally be waxed. Because binding this small is so difficult to show on camera, I'm going to go through the process with diagrams first. Then I'm going to show you the real life process. This diagram shows how I've assigned a different number to each of the different holes. I'll refer to the 4 holes in each signature in the same way every time, as numbers 1 to 4. You'll add one signature first, then the next, and then the last one. The method is basically the same for all of them, although the first one is added slightly differently. This diagram shows how the thread will look on the outside of the cover as you go. You'll make a loop at each end to start with, which you'll hold in place with a safety pin, and in the centre will be the long stitches. This is why it's called long stitch binding. Right, so to attach the pages to your cover, you first need to feed a length of beading thread into the eye of your beading needle. I would recommend using about 16 inches of thread. Take your first signature and feed the needle out of hole 1, leaving a thread tail of at least a couple of inches inside the signature. Go out through hole 5 in the cover, and then go back in through hole 5, leaving a loop on the outside. Put a safety pin on this loop and tighten the loop around it. Go out through hole 2 and hole 6, in through holes 7 and 3, out through 4 and 8, and back in through 8, leaving a loop on the outside of the cover. Again, use a safety pin to keep this loop in place. Then add the second signature, taking the needle in through hole 4, out through holes 3 and 10, in through 11 and 2, then out through 1 and 12. Take the needle through the first thread loop you made on the cover and remove the safety pin. Then go in through hole 12 and into hole 1 of the new signature. This signature will be the third. Then go out through 2 and 14, in through 15 and 3, and out through 4 and 16. Take the needle through the loop of thread on the cover, remove the safety pin, go back in through hole 16, and into hole 4 of the last new signature. This signature will be the fourth. Then go out through holes 3 and 18, in through 19 and 2, out through 1 and 20, take the needle under an adjacent stitch on the cover, and then go back through hole 20. Finally, take the needle back into the first signature again, hold 2, and tie the ends of the thread together to secure them. Feed the ends of the thread out of the signature to hide them and cut off the excess. Note that you need to keep pulling the thread tight as you go, whilst making sure you keep the thread tail intact at the beginning. And whenever you pull the thread, make sure you pull it parallel with the stitches. Right, so now I'll show you that in real life. So take your first signature and feed the needle out of the first hole, leaving a thread tail of at least a couple of inches inside the signature. Then go out of the cover and back in through the same hole, leaving a loop on the outside. Put a safety pin on this loop and tighten the loop around it, like so. Then go in and out of the holes until you reach the other end of the spine. Then go back inside the cover through the same hole, again leaving a loop on the outside. Keep this loop in place with a safety pin. Then add the second signature by taking the needle through from the outside to the inside at one end. Feed the needle in and out until you reach the other end of the spine. Then take the needle through the first thread loop that you made on the cover and remove the safety pin. Then go back inside the cover and add the third signature. And then you just repeat what you've already done. So go in and out of the holes until you reach the other end of the spine. Then go through the loop on the outside of the cover and remove the safety pin. Then go back inside the cover and add the last signature. Again, go in and out of the holes until you reach the other end. This time you take the needle under an adjacent stitch on the cover and then you go back through the same hole. Then take the needle back into the first signature again and tie the ends of the thread together to secure them. Feed the ends of the thread out of the signature to hide them and cut off the excess. Because my cover is leather, it's quite flimsy, so I'm going to add some glue for stability. I used the cocktail stick to add a bit of PVA glue along the edges of the signature, between the signatures and the cover, being very careful to not stick the pages together so that they can't open. The aim here is to make sure the signatures are kept in the position you want them, relative to each other and the cover. Then sandwich the pages in scrap cardboard and press them together, in my case with bulldog clips, until the glue dries. Note that the alternative way to add stability will be to glue a piece of card to the centre of the cover on the inside to become the spine of the book before binding. You would then put holes through this card and the cover and bind the signatures on in the same way as previously shown. Then use glue sparingly to attach the first and last pages to the cover. Make sure the book can still open and close without issue, then leave the glue to dry. Then use your ruler and a utility knife to trim the leather cover to the size you want. Do this carefully as errors can't really be fixed at this point. And that's it, your miniature book is now complete. I really hope you enjoyed this project and thank you very much for watching.